So you have the sheet in front of you,
I do.
and the first entry um, is mainly about how do I play my guy
Hmm.
relative to the other structural framings of the game. So to recap, you're either playing your protagonist, you're the actor, you're the
Hmm.
opposition, or you're a muse
Hmm.
with the your role at the table, and yet you have this character who's kind of floating there. Now, I am going to maintain that the only time that this is not potentially difficult is when you're the actor. And it may seem as though it would not be difficult ever, that as the role of either the opposition or the muse, that having a character is not a problem. But I'm going to suggest that it is. There are not edge cases, there are sectors of ways to play that are going to be very difficult, and people will probably instinctively avoid them, but in doing so are being very, very constrained and maybe not even realize it. Let me be clear. I'm playing the opposition, and your character uh, is doing something, and let's say that it is directed, in fact, toward my character, right? It just so happens that I'm playing, um, you know, Guinevere, and it so happens that you, the actor, are playing Arthur. And you decide that you are going to try to make amends to Guinevere. That's your approach. You're
Hmm.
addressing the problem of the kingdom that they're drifting apart.
Hmm.
Now, when uh, when I'm the opposition, I am to do what? Because they can say uh, it depends a little bit on what the actor says that they're specifically trying to do. It depends a little bit on why you say it's a problem. I mean, if I say Guinevere's in France, right, that sort of solves the problem. She's not there. But the point is that let's say I say the opposition in such a way that Guinevere is actually, can be interacted with. And then finally, the muse says, and the two of you are sitting in, you know, Guinevere's bedroom at 1 o'clock in the morning. And yes, I know they're not married yet, but that's where the muse has put us.
Hmm.
Okay, so that in that circumstance, I'm supposed to be playing the opposition. And so, does this mean necessarily that this Guinevere sitting here is simply not the same Guinevere in some meta way? Then, I mean, she's the same Guinevere in the fiction, but is she the same Guinevere as when I'm the actor? So now we basically have two actors in the scene rather than actor and opposition. Or is there some way I'm supposed to play the character for whom I would be the actor, but as the opposition? Is there some way to play that character that is specific to being the opposition?
And you don't find the same problematic situation to come up if uh, your protagonist is Una, and but you're my opposition still. You happen to pick up so and so character, player's Guinevere, and you play her, even though she's not your protagonist. Is
Okay,
that
first
still
of all, no,
problematic?
I have actually identified a dozen different ways this is problematic. I just
Okay,
picked the most
so you
obvious one.
include all
If
of
you
them.
want to,
Okay,
if you want to start finding the others, believe me, I have a list.
I'm just clarifying.
Right. So the one I just chose is the most uh what's the word? The most basic of the possibilities.
Yeah.
There are some others that are quite interesting um, in terms of characters who are there and who does what with them. For example, what if a muse brings in the character for which that person is the actor and um, says that that person is present as well? Now, that is a less problematic situation because technically they can just do what the muse is supposed to do and ask questions, but and partly that may involve saying what this does. Well, does that involve saying what this character does? If I am the actor for Una and I am the muse in the scene we just mentioned, and I and the the I'm the second muse, and so my job is, now that I know it's the bedchamber from the other muse, now I say, well, there's a candle, still burning that's just this far away from winking out in there, and that's an item. And I might say that an Una is, in their tiny magical form, has taken on a very tiny fairy shape and is hidden in the rafters up above, which is in my rules to do.
Mm-hmm.
So then, I mean, does that mean in the middle of the scene I can say Una flaps down and says this and says that? So that's another example of exactly the same issue. If a character is, now you can give an answer, but I want you to reserve that answer, okay? Because this
Sure.
isn't like a great big committee meeting on what to do with a game.
Right.
But the issue is these crisscrossing notions of introductions of characters relative to one's role at the table um, is a relatively non-role playing game thing to do. And while that's neither good nor bad, the point is that there does need to be a solution besides just avoiding doing that. The one of the things that could be taught by a game like this is how to deal with characters showing up in situations that, due to the agency of the people who play them. That's something that is important in role playing games, that you bring your character into the situation in many cases. You might even, I mean, in some games, you might say to the GM, can I be there? Or can I show up now? Stuff like that. And with nary a thought to how meta that is, they say, sure.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's normal. And so in this game, is there an equivalent or is that just shut out? You say, that's not in Baby's first role playing game. We're not doing that. So I mentioned that kind of a mini version of this is present. I mean, like another like incredibly tight and easy to understand version is when, um, say, I win a challenge on my turn or on my turn as opposition, um, and I narrate what happens. In many cases, you may find yourself narrating the response of someone else's acted character. And again, whether that's a problem or not, it's just a miniature version of this same idea. Um, so that's the first general consideration, and I don't think it's trivial because it has a lot to do with content and it. So I mean, about that character, um, what that character's for, what do they like, or what do they say, and when are they assertive and stuff like that. Um, uh, and that's why it leads to the next topic. I'm not sure if it's the next one, but on there somewhere has to do with backstory for characters and backstory of situations,
Mm-hmm.
particularly the three problems. The one with Fairy, Una, and Merlin and Morgana, the sort of interconnecting play of those is actually probably the easiest of these potential backstories. There's not too much to work with, although um, it did raise an interesting point in that last session of play that I did, which was when I found myself role playing Morgana, saying why she hated Arthur, which was because Arthur turned all of his attention to this stinking peasant boy, this pseudo noble that he seems to have found. Um, turned all of his attention onto him. And I said something about how you don't know anything about what it was like to study under Merlin.
Mm-hmm.
And I stopped myself there because I thought to myself, hold on, it's real easy right there to go full Oscar bait and say, and what he made me submit to as his, when I was but a girl, that kind of thing.
Sure.
Now, do you realize, but Merlin is an acted character at the table. Did I just tell the fellow role playing Merlin that his character is a pedophile and he has to
Mm-hmm.
do it? Or did I just, or can I say it, but we all know that Morgana's crazy and it's not true, which is even squickier if you think about it, right? So, do you see now what I'm getting at? This
Oh
kind of
yeah,
ongoing
yeah.
stuff. Some of it's kind of interesting. You kind of, you leave it out, meaning we're going to have to address it. What is going on with Arthur and Guinevere anyway? Is it a big deal? Is it a little deal? Is it, due to slight class differences? She being, an acknowledged member of the gentry and him having this frankly dubious claim. Is it a matter of personal compatibility? Maybe they totally are all about the Camelot thing and all about the unity of Britain and all about the peace and everything. Maybe he's not even all that warlike. Maybe he wants, a nice peaceful situation just like her, but they just don't physically particularly care for one another. Right? So the point is we don't know, and that's there to be done. And then that's very important because who gets to say when that topic comes up? I want to make amends with Guinevere, says the character, the person playing Arthur on his turn as actor. And he says, I want to make amends with Guinevere. And the person playing Guinevere said, yeah, that is, so what's the, basically what's the opposition? So I'm going to make amends. That's my approach. And the opposition, before the muses say anything, because it's opposition's job, the opposition, playing Guinevere or not, says, well, that would be a whole lot easier if you hadn't tried to, force her 2 nights ago.
Hmm.
And if that's the person playing Guinevere, she just basically role played Arthur into being, a bad person. Although it may seem like it, I'm not saying that anybody's trying to grief anybody else. Well, that's even though I've chosen two fairly extreme,
Mm-hmm.
non-family friendly examples. The same principle, that's only for emphasis. The same thing goes for any relevant content and
Yeah.
backstory that ties into why they even have this problem. And that would be for any of the three problems of the land, although, the more interest, some of them are more romancy than others.
Mm-hmm.
So since that's actually kind of a big deal, what weight are we giving to these conflicts as contributors? Everybody is involved. Even if they don't know it, everybody is involved in situation creation in this game. You're not just reading the description off the card. No. And so you're getting these inputs. And those inputs have emotional backstories to them. And the question is, who gets to say what about whom without some tedious negotiation? Is it okay if I say that it's this? That's exactly what we're trying to stay away from, right? That kind of workshopy, I want to say this or I would say this, but you tell me whether it's okay and all that nonsense, which gets us nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
So you have that's a related issue. You notice it's not quite the same as that business about actually playing and situating other characters. Now I'm talking about pre-existing content,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or rather fictionally pre-existing content. Um, but they obviously tie into one another a little bit, but they're not quite the same things.